Today's podcast is brought to you by AlleyRepair.com. Don't leave your skee ball machines lying around collecting dust in the basement. Let AlleyRepair.com bring those machines back to life. High quality workmanship for your skee ball playing needs. Contact AlleyRepair.com today. Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of the Pro Wrestling Podcast. This is going to be episode 22. Just a few things going on today in the wrestling world, and I felt like it was important enough to make sure I got out there and got you guys another episode, so I hope everybody likes it today. We're going to look back at this day in pro wrestling history. We got a couple dates. I don't want to give you 95 of these every day, but there's a couple important ones here. First off, going back to 2010. On this date in 2010 was the end of WWE's version of ECW. The show drew 1.14 million viewers in its final episode, and it saw Ezekiel Jackson beat Christian for the final ECW championship reign. It was kind of a sad thing to see it go. You know, the original incarnation of ECW was so iconic, and it's going to always stand the test of time. I actually feel a little, in some way, like the WWE version is going to just get forgotten about at some point because it was so unimportant and uneventful. One pay-per-view that was worthless. No major championship runs that had any significance in launching anyone's careers or anything, except maybe CM Punk being ECW champion at one point. But otherwise, just it wasn't a good product right from the start. But for the moniker, the name ECW, it was kind of sad to see something that coming out of the original show and then the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view in 2005. Even when they went back and did it again in 2006, you could see like that original ECW blood and that feeling and that vibe about the show. As soon as they put the influx of WWE talent into that show, it just killed the whole program. So I wasn't surprised to see it go under relatively quickly, but at the end of the day, it's still kind of sad to see any brand go out of business, no matter who it is. Also, on this date, 1996, Bret Hart defeated Stone Cold Steve Austin, Vader, and The Undertaker in a fatal four-way match to claim the WWF Championship. This was a really important title change, as there had been a lot of turmoil between Shawn Michaels giving up the championship and losing his smile and all that kind of fun stuff. It really was an interesting year, and the evolution of the WWE Championship, it was really... It was a tumultuous time. This is long before the Montreal Screwjob. Eventually, you would end up seeing Michaels and Bret face off for the championship and whatnot, and all the craziness that followed. But this was a period where Bret Hart he was playing the heel character, and he was able to take it to a whole different level, in my opinion. Moving on, we're going to get to some of today's news. The big nuptial announcement today. Paige and Alberto El Patron, sounds like they're getting married in May, so I'm sure that's going to make WWE really happy to have one of their divas who's out on for injury purposes marrying a guy who doesn't want anything to do with them, who thinks they need him more than he needs them. So I'm sure that'll make for wonderful WWE whatever their Divas show. You know, I'm sure they'll have lots of clips of that going on Totally Divas, but whatever. Kurt Angle was in the news today. It's expected that now that there's been all this speculation, the Wrestling Observer is reporting that it is expected that Kurt Angle is going to wrestle for WWE in this return to the company. He has to pass a physical. That's going to be the big test, but assuming he can do that, I can't imagine him giving him any kind of lengthy schedule. I'm sure it'll be something really refined and small, and maybe spot appearances here and there, a lot like Sting did, or maybe a little more active than Sting, but certainly not a full-time schedule. But it would be nothing short of awesome to see Kurt Angle back in the WWE ring. I sat online today and I pulled up Kurt Angle's first pay-per-view match, which was way back when he went against Shawn Stasiak, and you could tell how green he was back then. And then I went and I watched the match where he went to the I believe it was the Royal Rumble, and he wrestled Taz in Taz's debut and watched Taz choke him out, which was, again, showed how young in the business Kurt Angle was. Both were entertaining. To see how far he's come in all this time it's awesome. On the Vader front, I had posted in the previous podcast, Vader had put up a really deep, dark Twitter post that was very much implying that he doesn't have long left. What it's been reported, though, he's actually taken that tweet down. But if anybody remembers, back late last year, he was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. He said on Twitter that his doctor only projected that he would have like maybe 1 or 2 years left to live. And then he posted later, and there was some stories out talking about how another doctor had claimed that maybe that was the incorrect diagnosis originally, and that perhaps he might be able to get things back under control. And he's been working out with Diamond Dallas Page. I'm hoping Dallas Page has done so many things for so many people and really impacted a lot of lives in a positive way. So hopefully he can do something for Vader and keep this guy around a while. This is a legend in our business, and it's really sad to see what he's been reduced to. Sean Waltman in the news, X-Pac 6, whatever you want to call him, 123 Kid, whatever. He claims that that John Cena at SmackDown, he heard it from Cena himself that he's insisting that he put Bray Wyatt over on SmackDown this week. You know, for all the times people like to complain about John Cena not wanting to help out the other talents and not want to let anybody steal his spot or whatever you want to call it, to hear that John Cena was so gracious that he wanted to give Bray Wyatt a clean pinfall victory on SmackDown in front of a free show audience, that's a big deal. That says something about John Cena's character. So it was really cool to hear that from Sean Waltman, because that's somebody in the business. He understands. He had a conversation with AJ Styles also, where AJ said that John Cena, he in a personal conversation said that John Cena is the best there is in the business, and only people who've been in the ring with him can understand that. I buy it. I believe it. You could see his work ethic and all the things he's done for World Wrestling Entertainment. To hear that kind of compliment come from AJ Styles, who has traveled the world over, maybe people will start to really respect John Cena for what he really is, which is a top-level, all-time great performer. I don't care about his limited moveset. Let's face it, Ric Flair had a few chops, a few punches, a knee drop, and a flip over a turnbuckle and a figure four, and that was pretty much his repertoire, and he goes down as being one of the greatest world champions of all time. You know, every wrestler has their sequence, whether it's John Cena with his funky scoop, slam, suplexy thing with the five-knuckle shuffle and an AA, or the STFU, whatever you want, or it's Bret Hart doing his, backbreaker, elbow off the rope, sharpshooter thing. Like, they all have their move sequence, and John Cena is not unlike anybody else. You know, they all have their go-to sequences. You would think if wrestling was real, these people would obviously telegraph every single match, because all they ever do is the same moves over and over and over again. Do you really think Roman Reigns would have got caught with a running power slam by Braun Strowman this week if this wasn't choreographed? Of course Braun Strowman's going to go for a running power slam when you go to spear him. So for people to complain about John Cena's limited moveset, I think they're falling short of understanding that it is a show. It is for entertainment. And stop being so literal. This isn't the NFL where you have to have, a million thought processes that play every down. It doesn't work that way. This is something where you figure it out ahead of time. You get a rhythm with somebody. You tell a story in the ring. And John Cena does it as good or better than most throughout the history of wrestling. JBL in the news, a little bit frustrated that his Legends show is being canceled. He really felt that it gave some of those legends an opportunity to share insight and tell their story. And I have, for one, I've watched every episode they've had, whether it was the Stan Hansen, the Medusa Maselli, one with Ron Simmons, his old tag team partner. Like, no matter who he sits down with, Eric Bischoff, they were always insightful. They were always entertaining. Very exciting to listen to if you're someone who's a fan of old school wrestling. I love the one he did with the Outsiders. I thought they were very upfront with him in that. So I really wish they would have renewed this show. It's a shame that we're going to lose that. On the topic of WrestleMania, Kelly and Lisa Marie Varon, also known as Victoria when she was in WWE, she was Tara in TNA, have both been contacted about appearances at WrestleMania. Kelly was actually backstage at Raw this week. They're trying to do something with returning female stars. I don't know what they have in the works, but they've already done the women's battle royal thing a few years ago when they had what's her name, Tammy Sitch come in, and a few other people from the past, and that didn't go over quite so well. The people who they hyped up for being such big returns were eliminated within 30 seconds, and then you just had the regular main event stars in there. I hope they don't do something like that again, but hopefully they'll find a way to integrate some of these well-known divas from the past into their current programming. I've always wanted Victoria to get another run because I think she's very underappreciated for as much as she's contributed to wrestling, so it'll be curious to see how that works out. Darren Young, on an injury update for him, his issue with his bicep is going to leave him out of the ring for roughly 6 months. I know at first we knew he had serious surgery, but they didn't give an estimate as to how long he'd be out. Now they're saying about 6 months, so we're looking at a SummerSlam, maybe even later, return for Darren Young. Not that he's a premium top-of-the-line talent, but at the end of the day, they've been doing more with him in the last year with the whole Bob Backlund thing and whatnot, so this is kind of a bump in the road for him, but he'll be back sooner than later, hopefully. I found it interesting that there is a conversation on WrestleZone.com talking about Roman Reigns, why he should be the one next in line for the shot at Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania now that Randy Orton is giving up his opportunity. In the past, that has happened when Vince McMahon won the Royal Rumble by eliminating Stone Cold Steve Austin. He gave up his title shot, and they came out with the ruling. Shawn Michaels was the commissioner at the time, and they came out with the ruling that if the person who won the Rumble gave up their championship opportunity, that the next last person out of the ring, person who got eliminated 29th, would be the person to get the title shot, which in that year happened to be Stone Cold Steve Austin. So according to the rules, the precedent that was set back then, the next latest person to be eliminated would be Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns should be challenging Bray Wyatt for the championship. Now the thing is, what makes the timing of this funny is that today WWE released a book about the rules of WWE and how to break them. And it's interesting that they would have this storyline that could potentially come up in the fodder of the news world right when they're releasing that book. So with all rights, especially after Vince McMahon just had that conversation on the quarterly earnings telephone call talking about Roman Reigns jumping to the other show, that would be a very interesting play for him if you wanted to move him over prior to the draft. Just saying. Mick Foley had a big comment come out this week. He had an interview where he spoke about how Raw being 3 hours is a challenge when you're trying to go head to head with SmackDown, and people keep talking, the internet darlings keep talking about how wonderful SmackDown is, and that if the SmackDown GM and coordinators had to book 3 hours of TV, that they'd be getting some of the same flack that Raw is getting. And it's strange to hear a contracted WWE talent complaining about the 3-hour Raw, which is something that, as JBL noted on that one post-Raw interview segment, is a huge revenue draw for WWE. They get tons of advertising. The Overrun gets huge advertising because it's always a main event situation. So to hear Foley complaining about that, somewhat interesting. Samoa Joe, in the coming weeks leading up to WrestleMania at house shows, it looks like he's been booked to face Sami Zayn. You had to expect that coming out of Raw this past week. I guess this is what you do when you have Seth Rollins injured and waiting for him to come back for WrestleMania. Hopefully Joe and Sami Zayn tear the house down so it can help establish Zayn going forward. This could be a real positive for Zayn's career. Sting, one of my favorites of all time, he's in the news today talking about the WWE Champions game. I don't know if anybody's played this yet, but you can interact with characters, and it's turn-based wrestling game, talking about how the match he always wanted to have, now they can, against The Undertaker in that game. It always sounds good to hear Sting talk about how he wanted that match so bad, because at this point in his career and The Undertaker's career, probably not going to happen, but all of us true diehard wrestling fans can still dream and hope. In the international news for today, Kazuchika Okada. He's in the news because they were having a discussion about his contract. In 2015, Kazuchika Okada made $2.2 million. Now, that may not seem like a lot of money to you, but New Japan Pro Wrestling in general only raked in $21.6 million for the entire year. Now, they don't have the numbers for this past year yet. They still have to tabulate those, and we don't know his contract amount for this past year yet. That'll be released later as well. But when you think about the fact that 10% of their total revenue was paid to Kazuchika Okada, it tells you why he's the man in New Japan. They call him the Rainmaker. The money's flowing around him. Well, it really is. He's 10% of the company. It makes it so that match with Kenny Omega is all that much more important for Kenny Omega. If he's contract negotiating and he tears the house down with a guy making 10% of the money, maybe he's worth a little more too. Which leads me into Kenny Omega returning to New Japan Pro Wrestling. If you want to see that, you've been waiting since Wrestle Kingdom to see Kenny Omega get back in the ring. February 26th at the Honor Rising shows, you're going to get to see that. On night one, Kenny Omega is going to team with Adam Cole to take on the Briscoes, Mark and Jay. And then that same night, you're going to see another match going to headline the card is War Machine going to challenge the Young Bucks. Night 2 is where you'll see the big match that everybody wants to see, when Will Ospreay is going to team with Kazuchika Okada and the Briscoes to take on Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega. This will be the first time Okada and Omega are going to be in the same ring together since Wrestle Kingdom. So it'd be cool to see those two back in the ring. Highlighting that second night is also going to be Hiroki Goto. He's the never openweight champion. He's going to be defending that title against Punisher Martinez, who's really been tearing it up in Ring of Honor. And Adam Cole is going to defend the Ring of Honor Championship against Yoshihashi. If you haven't seen Yoshihashi wrestle, if you're not a big Japanese wrestling fan, I encourage you check him out on YouTube, because he's sensational, and this match is going to be Very brutal, I'm sure, and it's going to be a high-quality match. I'm actually hoping that he takes the title. It blends for a much better storyline for some of these cross-promotional matches, and it'll encourage New Japan to come to the United States some more and let our U.S. fans see them in some venue other than just New Japan Pro Wrestling on Access Television. Today's Looking Back match, speaking of YouTube, I want you to look up for me Jon Moxley versus Bryan Danielson. For those who don't know who those people are, which you probably should know the one for sure, Jon Moxley is Dean Ambrose. Bryan Danielson is Daniel Bryan. When you look this match up, it's going to come up with all kinds of other parts about it. They'll talk about how it's Dean Ambrose, it's Daniel Bryan, but the matches, it looks like it's in somebody's gymnasium. I mean, this is a real low-budget promotion, but very cool to see these guys in their young developmental years of the pro wrestling business going at it one-on-one. So, by all means, check that out. As I've been saying for the last few episodes, please give us a review, give us a subscribe. If you have somebody out there who is a pro wrestling fan, please spread the word. We want to see those likes go up. We want to see the subscribes go up. We want to see the comments flowing in here. And if you're going to put a comment, I want to ask you this. I'm going to start doing this every episode. I want you guys, you got Kurt Angle coming back to WWE. This is your opportunity to fantasy book. How do you bring him back? Who do you book him against? Who do you have him face off against? Is it at WrestleMania? Is it after WrestleMania? Give me your fantasy booking for Kurt Angle's return to WWE and put it in the comments below. That way I can see what your thoughts are, and we're going to try to do some of this fantasy booking every episode. I'm going to throw at you some kind of situation and see what you guys respond with. Our pro wrestling plug for this episode, Chikara Wrestle Factory. They're at 4711 Wingate Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, specializing in their curriculum of Lucha Libre, Purisu, European, British, and German styles, mixed martial arts, and American pro wrestling. The Wrestle Factory strives to create the most well-rounded performers active today. That's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with us in episode 23, where we're going to review all the happenings in the world of wrestling. Special thanks, as always, go out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for contributing all the music and sound effects for today's show. Today's podcast is sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bring a new friend to family game night with Sketchy People. Showcase your artistic side in this new game from Beazle Games. Go to www.thegamecrafter.com/sketchypeople to pick up your copy today. And to AlleyRepair.com. Contact Alley Repair today for all servicing of all your classic skee-ball, pinball, and arcade needs. Go to AlleyRepair.com. We want to thank you for listening to today's podcast, and we encourage you to go to our website at www.frolifeplanning.com to learn more about what Mr. Fro can do for you and your opportunities and your path to higher education. Remember, Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Mr. Fro. I want to thank everybody out there for taking a few moments with us today. We look forward to talking about more current events and rumors with you on our next episode. As I said before, please give us a subscribe, give us a thumbs up if you like what we do, and by all means, give us some comments. Let's move this podcast up the ranking system. Let's broaden our listener base, and then every time that happens, it's all thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for all the positive comments I saw this week. We had our highest viewership we've had since this show's inception, and that's all thanks to the hard work and dedication of our loyal listeners. So thank you so much for promoting us and keeping us in your social media feeds. Until next episode, take care, everybody.